Mikel Merino, a player not on the lips of many fans at the start of the window, so I've made it my mission to scour through hours of Mikel Merino footage to come up with a complete scouting report for the Spaniard, looking at his profile, his tactical fit and usage by Mikel Arteta, as well as discussing my own opinion on the potential signing. Welcome back to the Harvey Gratian YouTube channel. I'm so glad you found us or are joining us once again. I'm back from holiday with a lot of content to come, so with all of this to come, let's get straight on in with it, starting with Mikel Merino on the ball and how I think the rhythm to which he plays vastly differs the higher up the pitch he goes. And also let's cover how he fits tactically into Arsenal's different forms on the ball. Looking at Merino as the box-to-box left 8 for Real Sociedad, I would describe his deep build-up when he forms the double pivot with Xabi as pretty straightforward, and that actually points to quite a high level of intelligence as he understands his strengths and his weaknesses and has learnt to use his angles on the pitch very well. In these deeper phases, Merino is patient, measured, but never takes too many touches, and that's a theme. He has a sharp, incisive mind for connections with teammates, but this doesn't mean that he treats the ball like a hot potato. Merino's view of football, I think, is quite a transparent one. He keeps an open mind on top of the consistent, ever-present, authoritative and communicative presence. And a key part of what I'm going to demonstrate or try to demonstrate today is the difference between the speed of play you might think a 6'2" duelling phenom and this rangy midfielder may play at versus the actual speed of his actions, how efficiently he reads the game, shifts the ball and processes information. Of course, in typical Spanish fashion, he has his moments of guile, poise and pausa. In this example here, you see a calculated and unrushed Merino waiting for the space to open, not getting rid of it for the sake of it, but also not taking a touch too many. There's a half a second pause to delay the jumps of the Madrid players, and this generates space and time and a much purer possession of the football. I think in just this basic clip, there's a lot that encapsulates Merino. He may not be that build-up martial artist that we want and I want in the long term, that do-it-all or that sort of bulletproofs you enough in the circulation, can change the tempo, especially accelerating the tempo at will, and is an all-star at progression in either passing, carrying, or preferably both. But it's key for this video, and as I'm going to describe Merino going forward, for you not to superimpose these marquee midfielder qualities on Mikel Merino, because then you'll start to see where his true value lies. And when we're talking about building from deep, we are talking about a player who may not have that slick half-turn operation, an acceleration speed of a Nwaneri in terms of receiving in the pockets, turning, carrying and releasing. But Merino is by no means stiff. What populates Merino's game, specifically in the pockets, are moments of quiet audacity and quiet brilliance, an improvisational Cruyff turn maybe to get himself out of a tight spot, using his frame as a literal brick wall. He's pretty nimble, his hips for a tall guy, and how I think his awareness of space in the pockets is just so good, especially when you watch just how he moves off the ball. It was something I really took note of in my scouting of Merino. Of course, I'm not going to lie to you, he can get surrounded and overrun at times in tight spaces, but so was Xhaka in his interpretation of the left centre mid role for Arsenal. For the most part, keep Merino tight, connected and therefore secure in the build-up. So how does that translate to Arsenal? I have a much more in-depth video on this and what we've learned so far from pre-season coming up, but the most frequent build-up structure Arsenal have used this pre-season is slightly different. It's a 3-4-2-2, but the numbers, look, their numbers are not important because it can be a front 3, a front 4, a middle 5. But this variation of build-up is interesting for several reasons, because the fullbacks are given channel running roles, which for your swashbuckling, lambasting Calafiori or your elegant upright runner in Benjamin White, this structure seems tailor-made for them. Now there are changes to the fullback roles, like for example when Martinelli plays, and the build-up structure, the setup is much more to it than just the fullbacks, but that's all for another video. How does Merino apply to this? Well, Merino, as we've seen in pre-season with someone like a Nwaneri, gives Arsenal the option of deploying a connected sect of 3 centre mids when the one at the top of the box rotates lower. When Ranieri was playing with Ødegaard, he was mostly that offset one slightly higher, with Ødegaard in the pivot more. But when Arsenal do enact those pendulum movements, remember a continuation from last season, that left centre mid can rock deeper. But here with the fullbacks holding width, the forwards often clustering, Ødegaard is given even more licence this time to drift horizontally on top of this pivot platform. Merino is going to have a mixed left 8 role for Arsenal, as I'm going to get onto, but providing that sturdier foundation for Ødegaard to float, and also giving Merino one of the best team-wide connectors and build-up specialists now in Ødegaard is only going to benefit him. Merino isn't someone that's going to play the wow passes in the deep build-up. We'll get on more to how his progression of the ball changes higher up the pitch in just a sec. He's still a superb technician, but he's going to play, I think, the right passes in the build-up. He has a disguise as well. This example here shows how transferable these qualities are going to be when we talk about him higher up, where he's aware of his surroundings, he turns intelligently into space, weighs his options, tracks Zubimendi's run and finds him. Merino's left-footedness obviously means those half-opened up bumps out to a dynamically arriving Calafiori, unmarked out wide, those more relational combinations with Ødegaard, or those rotations on the left-hand side look like a nice base. Let's look at these rotations in more depth, because as Declan Rice and in pre-season with Salah Ad-Din have shown, Merino can drop into these left centre-back, left-back positions and give the space for Ødegaard, for Calafiori, or whoever the left-back is, to arrive forcibly into the central areas. Miles Lewis-Skelly has been doing this and has been essentially a placeholder, especially in his cameo against Manchester United, for Calafiori, I believe, in pre-season, often arriving powerfully high between the lines, as well as obviously tucking into invert. But more on how our left-hand side changes with Merino much later. We're talking about a 6'8 profile, a left centre mid who is more of a foil in the build-up, either as a left pivot or an 8. He also provides a stopgap, I think, for right centre mid minutes. But let's stick to what we know and what Merino calls his best position too. An 8 with a midfielder behind him to give him more freedom. He isn't true 6 depth for me. But what about Merino higher up the pitch? Because when I say a mixed 8 role for Arsenal, I truly mean it. And we have to quite clearly divide his deeper stuff to what he does well closer to goal. His aerial numbers have been repeatedly emphasised, so I'm going to save you the waxing lyrical over his long ball outlet play for Sociedad and his defensive presence. But before we get onto the more technical attacking side of Merino, this aerial ability gives Arsenal, I think, the option of playing a more encompassing Kai Havertz in that left shadow striker role, drifting from the position at the top of our box alongside the centre forward, creating that interchangeable relationship between outlet and second ball gobbler. But let's focus on the technical now, because I said Merino's pace of play increases as we go further up the pitch. It does. In the middle third, again, he's economic with his touches. He's more releasey. He's focused on layoffs. He works well with movers around him. That's a theme, I think, with Arsenal's left centre mid. A nice potential look, I think, with these left-hand-sided players that we have, playing quick and associative together as a unit. I think that's key. He looks through teams constantly, but again, although he's not a dictator like a Granit Xhaka, you'll see a lot of similarities in how Merino is able to put his foot on the ball in these higher areas and wait for a progressive lane to open up. Attacks may not stem from him, but I would say with Merino, attacks very easily flow through him, if that does make sense. But in these really advanced areas, Merino is all about acceleration. In the final third, Merino turns this dial up to his attacking play even more. We're talking 1 to 2 touches maximum for so many actions. Now, this is for Sociedad, and do I expect him to temper these tendencies with Arsenal? Absolutely yes. But do I want him to go all the opposite way? Absolutely not. He's adaptable. He's good enough to have 100 plus touches in a game, but I want him to keep this certainly aggressive mindset, because again, it provides a nice foil. Now these sort of first timer passes that he plays, these impulsive, I would describe them as progressive balls, are by no means magnetic off his boot. There are misplaced and miscued ones, but his base level of technical ability is definitely clear for all to see. He isn't a big volume big range passer. His progression in these phases comes over the medium and the short range, and his switches of play comes more when he drops into that left centre back, left back position deeper. But the key thing with his progression is that he gets the ball out of his feet, again quickly trying to exploit the space in behind. Merino isn't going to be a creative hub that opens up every single angle possible on the pitch, moving the ball big and fast in a way that totally transforms our mid-block play or our transitional dynamics, but he is going to help our transitions, definitely in the sense of when it breaks for him, on a turnover or on the counter-attack, there won't be any indecision. Something I've called for in our improvement. He also gives you, I think, a presence of actively seeking that ball behind to Martinelli every single time, essentially, he picks it up, accessing Martinelli quickly and reliably. Add this to Nwaneri minutes and Ødegaard drifting left, it's another help to facilitate and hopefully return that slick, fluid, left-hand-sided play. I think a big part of Moreno on the ball that deserves looking at is his goal scoring potential for Arsenal, and I haven't seen this focused on much. Like I said, it's a role that at times is going to be very Havertz left shadow striker-y. The left back tucking into midfield, squeezing the opposition, Merino moving into the same line as the centre forward, and when we have the chance to load the box, I think we have a real chance to create an unstoppable half-space crossing dynamic. For example, the left back allowing Martinelli to chop back and play a back post ball for Kai Havertz to knock it down to Merino, or Ødegaard, or on the right hand side, Ødegaard, Saka, White, replicating this with Merino most likely at the back post this time. Again, Merino's aerial prowess has been exhausted, but what has not is his box presence. He generates scoring with his feet. Remember this finish from Tomiyasu, okay? It's dismissive, it's emphatic, or these type of poaches from Havertz, extensive, reachy types of finishes. Merino gives you a similar sort of edge in the box, and it's all to do with his span, his powerful legs, his reach. Almost all of his goals, if they're not with his head, this type of box finish. His presence commands a larger area, a larger radius than the normal person. He makes these lucky, scrappy goals into more regular occurrences. Again, comparing to Nwaneri, Merino is a different kind of box threat. There's less sniffing about, there's less lying in wait like Nwaneri. He's more matter of fact, but he still ghosts in, but he's just more bullish, I think, in the final moment. I got to a point in my scouting of Merino where I had just seen him purely as a maintainer of our flow instead of a flow changer, and we're talking about a very good facilitator as opposed to that off-the-cuff player. But is this distinction of Merino right? We're going to get into the proper nitty-gritty of his outer possession work very shortly, but with this chaos and panic he creates in the final third, he might not be the flow changer I want our attacking signing to signify, but is there more of a maverick to Merino? Maybe. And also, when we're talking about out of possession, it's a yes and no again. Again, Merino and duels is a match made in heaven, as it's been made clear to us. But what is intriguing to me is the type of duel that he really, really excels in. It's specific, but this is so important. It's the bouncing ball in the middle of the pitch. Think about you sitting at home, okay? When are you most aggravated as a fan when it comes to Arsenal not controlling a game? You know, that rising sense of exasperation. You may be stressed when we have those end-to-end affairs, but in those end-to-end games, it's always partnered with the knowledge that we have arguably the best rest defence on the planet and an attack that's hopefully only going to be bolstered when it comes to the transition. The games that you actually get exasperated are the ones that we cannot get a rhythm, where tackles break up our flow and things become, in the best way to describe it, like a pinball machine in the middle of the park. To put a stop to that discontinuity is a genuine superpower for Mikel Merino. Think Rodri for Man City and his ability to gobble in these second balls into his momentum in those chaotic central areas, put a foot on things, recirculate, maintain a team's flow. Merino is like that. Again, those stretchy long legs expand that radius and manufacture these second ball contests into not really contests at all. What I want to ask you, I guess, is with this ability, Merino's general high-level duel winning ability in the press, the Calafiori side, signing, does this allow Arsenal to be a bit more chaotic, play that overly ambitious pass and back yourself in the frenzy of the counter-press that follows to win it back, turn moments of imperfection into genuine opportunities, like Liverpool have done so well? Merino, Calafiori, Rice, Gabriel, Havertz, Saka, Martinelli, awkward customers that condition certain moments into favourable conditions. With this, let's deep dive into Moreno out of possession. Is he a Goliath? I would say yes, in a certain role, and that role is Arsenal's left centre mid. At Sociedad, Merino's role out of possession is as close as you could realistically get to Arsenal's. He is their fulcrum of the press at the tip of their diamond, of a much more intense diamond with more of an inclination to go man-to-man, and in the block, he sits in the pivot in the 4-4-2. Actually, before we get into it, do I need to show you any more than this? Here is Merino bodying Tchouaméni. I repeat, bodying Tchouaméni. A unicorn profile in the 6. Again, here he uses his frame well, but look at the rest of the action too. An immediate intention to springboard the attack, play through and high immediately. Again, this left centre mid role is transferable from Sociedad to Arsenal. It focuses Merino on these jumpy, aggressive, front-footed actions. And I think sometimes his presence alone, breathing down the back of your neck, like Havertz, is enough to make the opposition think twice. He's going to get spun the odd time. He isn't going to eat up space running back towards his own goal. But this is only going to happen on occasion. And remember, he has Declan Rice in the 6 behind him. Again, those legs of Merino eat up so much of the advantage others may have on him in terms of raw pace and maybe sprint durability, if that's fair. Look at this. His span is just too big here. You have to actually outmaneuver 2 or 3 of him just to beat him. Back in the pivot out of possession, I actually think he's arguably even more tailor-made for this. Another proactive defender, brilliant reader of space, but I think that ability to drop back low into a 5 and defend the box, and the prospect of just having another big body in our block like this is pretty scary to me. Some will point to Merino being rash out of possession. This isn't the right choice of word. He only goes to ground when he has to, and he's part of an aggressive Sociedad scheme. Again, he's calculated, has a clear mind, is open to change, and when we look at him, Calafiori, as a complementary pair, I think it looks like we're doubling down on how we press out of possession, with Ødegaard leading that switch from zone to man-to-man. Our shape naturally tilts towards the right. To help you envision this, it's a compression from the left-hand side that funnels the ball right, that tilts. We have a left-hand side of squeezers: Martinelli, Nwaneri, Merino, Calafiori, Timber, Tomiyasu, Lewis Skelly, etc. And a right-hand side who are composed, patient and recirculate. But to summarise him out of possession, keep him to defending the areas. He already does very well. He's already going to help out Rice indirectly by virtue of taking the volume of defensive actions we trust upon Rice out of the way when they play together. Although we still need subsequent Declan Rice depth in someone who can hoover up transitions, Merino fits the bill out of possession for the left centre mid really well. Lastly, how does Merino improve our left-hand-sided dynamics? First of all, his left-footedness naturally quickens the speed of play, and partner this with his temperament and his economy of touches on the ball. It looks like we're trying to make the left-hand side sort of a fluidly revolving piece next season. Again, the left-hand side probably still lacks a specialist overlapper and that big ranging progressor to support Martinelli, but what it does have now with Merino, Nwaneri, Calafiori is a slickness to its potential rotations. Think Bayern Munich away, how static that left-hand side felt with a lot of to feet and deeper movements, those unsupported Martinelli runs in behind, isolated on the touchline. Tomiyasu and Rice, I think, signalled an improvement to our left-hand side play, but as we saw against Bayern, Tomiyasu under or overlapping Martinelli is not a telepathic connection, and shifting Rice means you give yourself other problems in the middle. In Merino and Calafiori, we have more of a pushing factor to that left-hand side. Players to squeeze the opposition back and not have everything drifting towards your own goal. This is really key, and I'm going to expand on this going forward in the future. We've got favourable relationships now, better conditions for Martinelli to move inside, definitely more game-breaking qualities. That is an improvement. We finally added depth to the squad in that 6-8 left centre mid mould, but also someone, I think he was genuine upside in the final third, even if it's not the X Factor edition we're all still waiting for. So that begs the question, what do I think of Merino as a signing overall? Let's get the framework for this signing figured out first. Arsenal's main requirements that I posited at the start of the window was number one, maintaining our progression, specifically in midfield, improving our left-hand side dynamics, getting better in the moments. Remember, it's not necessarily more goals, but moments. It's sourcing that flow changer in attack to offer that edge to us in the box and in transition. And finally, Rice and Saliba depth. With Merino and Calafiori, I think we can say we're building that revolving jigsaw piece on the ball on the left-hand side and a jumpy off the ball. And Merino doesn't necessarily give that Rice depth in the true six, but does affect still indirectly the volume of defensive work that Rice will have to do. We still need that attacker, and for me, the big one is the progression, right? Because we have to accept that our build-up is fantastic. It really is. But we have to accept that next season, with Merino's addition, it looks like more of an approximation of our progression between a more touchy Odegaard, Rice growing in the six, Timber dictating more, Calafiori adding much needed dynamism and that ability to push the opposition back. Ranieri more minutes too. It's more of a collectivization. We're still probably lacking that build-up martial artist I alluded to, that real progressive needle mover. And you're looking at, I can forgive you for looking at this move like it is a sidestep from Granit Xhaka. And for Merino to be and have that Jorginho/Trossard squad player success story, he has to be given an environment where he is allowed to be a squad player and not give us that X factor. As a piece of the squad, he is brilliant because there are lots of factors making that transition from Sociedad to Arsenal really smooth. And as we've covered the player today, what makes his role potentially really exciting is that he has a handful of additive qualities as well, that combativeness, that height, that on-ball aggression and chaos. Let's see how this framework is applied for the rest of the window. We've definitely made a start to addressing them, and it's where the club feels or whether they're able to find a player to cash in on those margins that Arteta the whole summer has said we're working on to maximise even more. You can judge Merino the player, but Merino the signing, well, get some players in to move themselves and the ball quick and far first. And we might just be onto something. So judge Merino at the end of the window because he's not going to be that X factor that takes us suddenly that pivotal step rung up the ladder. But for him to be a Trossard Jorginho success story, give him the context to excel in. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed. A lot of videos to come. I'm going to be watching with my pen and paper Arsenal by Leverkusen tonight, giving you some thoughts on that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate taking the time out of your day to watch the video. Catch you in the next one. See you later.